Your platform is one of liberty, obviously, and one that points to the Constitution and one that also points to state sovereignty, I assume here. One of the biggest things I look at is the stimulus package, and, I think Rick Perry did a decent job talking about it, but he didn't do anything about it. And we look at this and we find that, for instance, federal or state programs that were cut because they weren't working or because we were trying to trim the budget are all of a sudden back in business thanks to the stimulus bill. We're finding that the toll roads are now about to be pick up steam again, even as they were shut down for lack of support and money. We find that surveillance grids and programs are being paid for by this stimulus money, and that entitlements for people and for illegals also being, this just puts the government right back in our laps. And I'm looking at a story here. The crushing hidden tax of federal regulation soars. It is $1.17 trillion to put these compliance burdens on Americans. Talk to any of that if you'd like.
Well, I think all of us have got to be very concerned about the economic condition that we find ourselves in. Texas leadership has been out there saying it's okay, we're better off than the rest of the country. And I had someone last week say to me, well, at least we're not California. And I said, yet. We're not California yet. If we don't grow some backbone and begin to push back on those kind of things, and you're absolutely right, they hold these big, enticing carrots out there, and we just haven't had leadership who said no. That enslaves Texas. You don't have the constitutional authority to do that, and we are not going to take that carrot. I think many of us in the Liberty Movement have been commending Mark Sanford in South Carolina for the work that he's doing there to say, if we take it, if you force it down our throats, we're going to use it to reduce or eliminate our debt. Texas has a good deal of bond indebtedness. There are some things that we could do there. We are attempting to build a team of attorneys and members of the judiciary that will help us look at how that can be executed. How can we get out there and push back? Who's advocating for Texas? Who's out there defending us between this overreaching federal government, whether it's the federal courts or the federal Congress or the federal executive branch coming in and telling us how we're going to live? Who's taking up our side? Is it the Attorney General? Is it the governor? And I just don't think we've heard that in a very loud, clear, and distinct way. But we certainly have the opportunity to do that. I'd love to talk about some of the economic things that I think Texas can do to shore us up a bit and protect us from the continuing U.S. economic.
Well, give us like your top one or two answers, I call them, not solutions.
We've got to reduce tax burdens eliminate tax burdens. And I'm not talking about, cut one tax and create another one. I'm talking about cutting spending. I think we need to do some shifting of services back to the local level. We're talking about, we believe in local government. 2 cents of our local sales tax stays local and 6 cents goes to Austin. That's not local.
Yeah.
I think we need to look at shifting that sales tax and keeping it in the local community and beginning to provide these services locally and cut services at the state level. We've got to cut spending, and we've got to cut bureaucratic overhead, and we've got to put those things back in the counties and cities where they ought to be until Washington will leave us alone.
How would you, as governor, leash the Texas legislator in order to do that?
I'm hoping that we're going to see as this continues, it really is early in the political cycle, and we're just wrapping up, I'm sure your listeners know, wrapping up the Texas legislative session. We need a bunch of new faces in Austin in 2011. And I hope those folks will be stepping up and running on similar platforms for a number of state rep and state senate seats so that we bring to Austin a group of individuals who understand what it takes to keep people free, We've got to get the government out of our pockets and off of our land and off of our property, whether that property is your wage or whether that property is the house that you live in or the car that you drive. It's yours, and you ought to own it when you work for it, not have to be taxed or be renting it from the government. So you're right. There's a lot of work to be done. The governor certainly has a bully pulpit, but he's going to need a lot of help from the legislature, and that's going to mean Texans are going to have to step up and run in some of those seats. But I bet we'd all be real happy if we saw some
and from the people, because if we have an effective leader such as yourself, Deborah, then perhaps people can be swayed to support the sensible, liberty-minded thing. Part of doing that, in my opinion, and I'll give that to you now if you don't mind, is, we need sound money to buy things like health care. So when we look and we see that we've lost 30% of the dollar's buying power since the year 2000, that means we can buy 30% less. And we also need collective bargaining on behalf of the people that maybe don't want to buy insurance. We certainly don't need it forced upon the people, which is, I think, where Obama is going here. Which, of course, puts constraints on how the lives you lead and how you raise your children and what vaccines they take to comply with the insurance companies. But, I think that if we have the same collective bargaining that the insurance companies have, and that health care costs the same on a mass bulk scale that it costs for an insurance company, and we had a sound dollar, Deborah, maybe we could afford our own health care.
Well, I don't want to let go of that sound money piece. I know we're talking about health care, but you're so right. Having just weights and measures, having sound currency is important. And we might think that, there's not really anything that our state can do, but there are a number of things that we can do. There are a number of provisions. In fact, we got real excited in Texas and all over the country as we saw kind of 10th Amendment state sovereignty resolutions coming up everywhere. But believe it or not, there were a couple of state legislatures, that were actually debating sound currency policies. And we've looked at some of that here in Texas. We've identified a number of things. The first thing that I think Texas has got to do, and it's not an easily accomplished feat. We have a lot of boards that control a lot of assets, but we're looking at just over $50 billion in assets in the state of Texas that some of you might consider to be toxic assets. Those assets have declined in value.
We can pick up here when we come back. We'll wrap up this interview with Debra Medina, running for governor.
I have been a proponent of the death penalty, and I recognize that there's a lot of debate in that area now with the new, some of the new technology that's available to us. I think that we have got some work to do in our criminal justice system. Criminal justice is about punishment. It is not about rehab. And I think that in some ways our justice system has been a little bit softer than maybe it needs to be. If we're really going to have it as a deterrent to crime, then I think we have to be hard on criminal behavior. I recognize that's a two-edged sword, and there are, those tragic cases out there where someone was wrongfully convicted, and so there is not
more than a few.